My name's May. I love yarn. I love to knit and crochet. Those are my hobbies, and I also happen to have been born visually impaired, legally blind, and completely colorblind. So I mostly knit and crochet by feel. And well, if you're a returning viewer to my channel, you've seen that I designed a beautiful feather and fan lace blanket. You can find a free tutorial on my channel for this pink lacy open baby blanket. But I also know not everybody likes really lacy blankets for their baby, right? They don't like the big holes. They just think they're too airy. People live in colder climates. Winter happens, right? Where I live in Washington State. It's cold already, okay? So people also want solid knit blankets just because it's their preference, because of the climate, but they still want a lightweight blanket. So I've been playing around with some knit stitches, some different patterns, trying to create like a nice kind of a wave or ripple stitch baby blanket pattern that's going to be solid, and that's nice. So it's pretty much mostly going to be using, knit and purl, and then we're going to do our increases, with like the knit one through the front and the back as opposed to a yarn over, right? With my feather and fan blanket, we do our increases with yarn overs. Well, we don't want to do that because the yarn overs are what makes the lace. So I've been playing around with that, looking at some different stitches, and I have been working on, well, I worked them up in swatches to kind of see what those ideas would look like. And so a couple of tips if you are interested in working up different ripple stitches and wave patterns for blankets. Do a swatch. I'm not big on swatching. Yeah, if you're a returning viewer, you know that. But do a swatch. Make a dishcloth. Okay, this is my swatch of what we're going to be doing today. So this is in the Knit Picks We Crochet. Our swatch is in the Knit Picks We Crochet Dishy 100% machine washable cotton. This is a dishcloth. It's in the color Pebble, so it's light grays and medium grays and white. And this is what I worked up, and I like it for the most part. I think it makes a beautiful dishcloth. I think it would make a beautiful hand towel or a kitchen towel. And then I was like, of course, that would make a beautiful baby blanket. And I think it's great for, this is a multicolored yarn, and so I think it's great for a stitch pattern that for some people might otherwise look pretty boring, right? You're like, okay, that would look really boring in a plain color. So I think this is a great pattern to work with these visually busy, like this stripe and these multicolored yarns. I think this is a great pattern for that, whether it's a dishcloth cotton or an acrylic stripe yarn. I think it's beautiful. So the one thing I do want to talk about, because you get this nice, because of the shaping and the increasing and the decreasing, you really do get a beautiful little wave kind of a pattern on the bottom. But when you do the bind off, right, you'll notice my bind off is kind of flat, so that's something to keep in mind. Now I think if you're doing like a hand towel, right, and you're just draping it over your stove edge, that's fine. You're probably not going to see it. You're tucking it in around the baby, you probably won't see all the edges real well. Even if you're hanging it over the edge of a crib, right, you can kind of drape that to the inside or whatever. But not everybody likes that, so I did play around with it a little bit more. Got another dishy coming out here. And so this pattern's got 12 rows in it, right? And you basically do 5 rows of garter stitch, right? And then don't be intimidated by 12 rows, by the way, because it's super easy to memorize. The 12 rows are really only comprised of 3 different types of rows, okay? And 5 of our 12 rows are garter stitch. You're literally just gonna knit every single stitch on both sides for 5 of our 12 rows, okay? So don't be intimidated. Oh, I can't memorize 12 rows. No, it's only 3 rows that you got to memorize, or not. As somebody who's visually impaired, I like to memorize my patterns, because then I don't have to try to refer back to them. But you know what? If you have cognitive issues, you can always go back and look at it, right? But it's only 12 rows, so it's not challenging. Okay, so but 5 are going to be in garter stitch, and then we do have our little 7 rows of the stitch pattern where we create our wave here. It's a solid wave, as I said, for the most part. You got these little columns in here of gaps, but it's not bad. I don't think it's too gappy for cooler climates. It's not the kind of holes that little babies can get. Some babies love sticking their fingers in the holes in blankets. Not all do, so this could be a good one for those that don't. Um, the wave is just a little bit offset, which I think is cool, particularly that we're going to do it up in blue. So it kind of actually literally gives a kind of a wave look, right? Like a wave that's kind of curling over in the ocean. So that's really fun. Um, so we're going to do our shaping with that, and then we end it with the garter stitch, okay? And that's why it's kind of flat on top again. So I did play around. I got another dishy cone out here. It's a great way to swatch, right? If you want to keep practicing, you can swatch, and you can leave it on the cone, and then you can just unravel it when you're done, and you don't have to waste your yarn. So we're just practicing with this yellow swatch. So one thing that I did with this is on my very last repeat of the garter stitch on the on the side of the patterning, right, is that I went ahead and worked those garter stitch rows in pattern at the top. So that will definitely help. If you're interested in kind of keeping a little bit more of a wave on the top of your blanket, that's something that we can consider and we can play with, is adding a little bit of the increases and decreases to those final garter rounds before we do our bind off, okay? So that's something that we can play with if that's a big deal to you, right? If you're like, I don't like that it's flat on one edge, that my edges don't match, then that's something we can absolutely play with on that a little bit to give it just a little bit of wave. I haven't decided yet how I'm gonna end my blanket, okay? I really don't know yet. So because guess what, I started my blanket and it's still very much in process. Yeah, I'm making it, and I was gonna make the entire blanket and let you all see it first, and I was like, you know what, they might want to actually make it with me, okay? So if you just want to make it into a dishcloth, then just make a dishcloth. You want to make a hand towel, just make a hand towel. But if you want to make an entire blanket with me, I am using today the Lion brand. I know, gasp, right? We're mixing brands in this video. So this is the Lion brand Big Scoop. It's a number 3 DK weight yarn. I really love it. I love these skeins because they're huge. They're over 1,000 yards. In fact, they're over 1,100 yards, right? So I mean, I've been working on my blanket. I'm probably almost half done with it, and I'm holding up my skein, and I still have a lot left. Okay, this is what it's gonna look like in this skein. This is about, and this is like, worked up. Okay, let me just show you the blanket that we're making today, and then you guys can stitch along. Look at this blanket, y'all. Look at this blanket. Is that not beautiful, beautiful, beautiful? Look at that. Gorgeous, right? I'm having so much fun working up this pattern. I am so excited to be doing this because these big scoops are beautiful. They're very, very colorful. I think children like them, but at the same time, some patterns can just be too busy, right? The yarn is visually busy, right? It's visually busy. And so it can be challenging, right? It can be challenging to look at these patterns. There's a sample, of like, striping that you're going to get with the different colors. So this color is called, that we got our blanket in, is called Blue Raspberry. So it's pastel blue, it's turquoise, it's mint green, and some darker denim blues. And it's these nice long stripes. And if you're colorblind like myself, Lion brand actually does a great job of describing the colors on their website. So if you go through and you select each different shade, it's actually going to tell you the 4 or so different shades that are in that yarn. So that's super nice. That's definitely one of the reasons why I shop at Lion brand and give them my money, okay? Because they describe their colors to me. Love that. So now there's not a lot of colors. There's a fair amount of colors. I don't know, maybe like 10 or something, 12 of the Lion brand Big Scoop in the 1,100 yards. But they do also have ice cream in a smaller skein. Okay, so if you're not like thrilled with the color choices in the Big Scoop, you can go to the regular ice cream, right? And you can look at that and use those. However, just know that you're going to have more ends to weave in, right? One of the things that I love, love, love about these big, big scoops, right? Unless I were to make this blanket huge, I'm not going to have to, tie in another ball and have more ends to weave in. I'm going to have my beginning tail to work with and my end tail to weave in. And that's it, y'all. That is it. I can make this beautiful, beautiful blanket pretty big. I don't even know. You guys think I'm halfway done with this baby blanket, or you think we should make it bigger than that? I mean, look at that already. This could be half of a baby blanket. For some people's opinions, they probably would say, yeah, that's half of a baby blanket, right? I don't know how big we're going to make it because we got this big old skein here. I'm really having fun with it. I think it's beautiful, and I think it works really well with the stitch pattern that some people, right, might otherwise say, that's kind of visually boring, right? Let's take another look at my yellow swatch here. So if you look at it, you know, because half of it, I think it's got neat texture too. As somebody who's visually impaired, I kind of like that we rotate in the texture between, you know, first of all, we got waves, so you can feel the up and the down in the stitch pattern. You got this big chunk of garter stitch. You got the 5 rows of garter stitch. Then you got your, you know, stockinette wave section. So I think it's nice because you can literally feel all the different ridges and patterns in this. But also, a lot of people are going to look at this in just one solid color and be like, that is so visually boring. Right? They're like, that is visually boring, and I don't want to look at that for an entire blanket. Like in a little pretty yellow dishcloth, that might be fine in a kitchen, right? A dishcloth you're just going to wash your dishes with in like a, you know, a brown or something, it might be fine. But for a baby blanket, babies can really enjoy these multicolors, right? They kind of keep them visually stimulated. They like looking at it, so they might like feeling up, you know, the different ridges and the textures on this. So it gives them a combo of kind of some tactile stimulation because they can feel the different ridges on there. And it can also, with these striped yarns, give them some visual stimulation. So, but some people definitely will find this too boring to work up in a solid color. I think it's fine in the kitchen, but like I said, I think children will find these striped patterns way more fun and more interesting for blankets. So now, of course, you could work this up even as a dish towel or as a blanket in solid colors and then just stripe it, right? Like do different colors for the different sections. And you could absolutely stripe colors. I mean, you could do all kinds of things with this, right? You could do different textures of yarn. You could have a lot of fun with this. So, so the dishcloths are worked up in the Dishy 100% machine washable cotton. But the big scoop is a 100. I don't know if I said it or not. It's a 100% acrylic, right? It's a 100% machine washable acrylic, which makes it super great for baby blankets. This is an easy care, machine wash, tumble dry blanket. So those busy sleep deprived mamas, you can just toss this thing in the wash, right? Because we know babies do baby things, right? So you want an easy care blanket that you can throw in the wash and have it and out of the dryer by the time they get up from their nap. So this is really fun. I'm really enjoying it. So my blanket, because it's a DK weight yarn and it's a number 3 yarn, I am working it up on a US size 6 or 4 millimeter needle, okay, because that's a number 3. But for today's sample, we are going to work it up. We're going to do a sample. I'm going to show you how I do it. We are going to go ahead, and by the way, if you're interested in the color of my gray dishcloth, it is the color Pebble. It's just some little stripy shades of gray and knit picks and we crochet. Have a variety of different stripy and multiple colors in this. So if you're interested in this pebble gray, just kind of some neutrals, that can be, that's what color that is. Today's sample that we're going to work it up on a Dishy cone, a number 4, in just the color butterscotch. As somebody who's colorblind and visually impaired, I'm going to be honest with you, I have no idea what colors are good for working up with on the screen, what colors people can see, what you can't see. I would love to hear from you if you think using this kind of this butterscotchy tan with maybe a slight golden hue, if that's a good color for our sample today or not, because I genuinely have no clue what colors people can see, okay? So because this Dishy is a number 4 weight kitchen cotton, I am going to be working it up on a US size 7 or 4.5 millimeter needle. So just keep that in mind, that you can work this blanket up on a 3 DK with a 6 4 millimeter needle, or you could work it up on a 4 worsted weight, right? And you can work it up on a 7 millimeter, or a US size 7 4.5 millimeter. Okay, so it's pretty flexible in my opinion. I think it's pretty yarn inclusive. I think you could do this absolutely on a sport weight, on a fingering weight. I even think you could do this up on a bulky weight. I haven't done it yet, so I can't say for sure. But I think most of these wave and these ripple stitch, whether it's knit or crochet, for blankets and dish towels, I think they're pretty yarn inclusive. Okay, so and this is, in my opinion, I wouldn't call this a beginner friendly pattern, because we're doing a little shaping to create our waves. We have to do some shaping here, right? But I would definitely say it's an advanced. I wouldn't even call this an intermediate pattern. I'd say it's a good advanced beginner. Once you have the basics of shaping down, I think you can do this. Okay, so the skills that you will need today to make this along with me, whether you're making a dishcloth or whether you're making a beautiful baby blanket, that you're going to need today is you're going to need to know how to cast on to your project. Now you can use whatever cast on that you want, okay? I prefer the long tail cast on, so that's what I'm going to use. But if you have a different cast on, you do you. I'm not here to tell you how to cast on in today's video, all right? But I'm going to use the long tail cast on. So you need to know how to cast on. You need to know how to do the knit stitch, which I will go over with you, but not in great detail. You're going to need to know how to do the knit stitch. You're going to need to know how to purl, okay? And then to shape it, we shape it by doing decreases and then increases. So we start out doing a knit two together. So you will need to know how to knit two together to do a decrease, to take out one stitch. And then you're going to need to know how to, so that's going to create our little dips, right? Our dips are created by two increases, these valleys, by putting two decreases next to each other, side by side. And our increases, these peaks or our mountaintops, are created by putting two increases next door, side by side. That's what gives it kind of that dramatic wave look, which is why I think it looks really cool in the blue for like the ocean. So the increases are, both of them are done because I said we want to avoid the yarn overs for the lace, right? We're going to do these with a knit one through the front and the back loop. Okay, knit the same stitch through the front and then through the back. We're going to create two stitches out of one to create our peaks or our mountaintops, and then we're going to go back down to create our valley. We're going to put two decreases side by side because we put in two increases. We have to make sure that we take out two stitches in decrease to keep our stitch count even. So at the end, we're going to work a different type of increase called a slip slip knit. It's a little bit harder than a knit two together in my opinion, but you can still do it, okay? So you're going to need to know how to do that. And then of course at the end, you are going to need to know how to bind off in some way, right, to finish your project. So those are the skills that you need to learn. And actually those are the skills that you need to know, right, to make this, whether it's a dishcloth or a blanket. That's what you're going to need to know. I'm going to create the tutorial today. I'm going to do a small swatch with you on this dishy cone. And then I hope that you will join me here on YouTube and that we will finish up this blanket together, right? I'll come back with you on this camera and we'll chat and we'll visit. We'll do a Mondays with May. I do those on my channel. And I do Whip Wednesdays where we get our craft together and we just chat, okay? So we'll do those together on our channel, and we'll finish up this blanket together. So of course I want to hear from you too. Are you going to make this with me? Okay, I'm going to pause the camera now, take it off the vertical view. I'm going to put it over on my horizontal tripod over here so you can have a good horizontal view of it, and I will teach you how to make this beautiful, beautiful blanket. Okay, be right back. Okay, so here's a horizontal view of this beautiful baby blanket in the Lion Brand ice cream. This is what I am going to be making. I really hope you get some Lion Brand ice cream or whatever yarn is your preference, and that you make this beautiful blanket with me. And then I will give you, look at how pretty that is. And then I will give you a horizontal view too of the dishcloth. If you just want to work up a little dishcloth, This is the edge that I'm talking about that takes on the shaping. This is in the color Pebble. This is the edge that I was talking to you about, how it's a little bit flat. If you want to see the back of it, that's what the back of it's going to look like, right? That's just the back. So, but you could definitely drape this as a dishcloth, right, over, you know, or a towel or something, and you'd still get that beautiful edging. So, okay. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that this stitch pattern is worked up in multiples of 11, okay? So our stitch pattern here is multiples of 11. And then we're putting, whether it's a dishcloth or a blanket, I am putting on a garter stitch edge of 3 stitches on the right and 3 stitches on the left. Now, of course, you can use however many garter stitch. I just feel like the garter stitch edging helps it to lay flat a little bit better. But if you wanted to put 5 garter stitches on each edge, of course, it's your project. It's your dishcloth. It's your towel. It's your blanket. You do you, right? We're all about that on this channel. But for our dishcloth today, because each of these segments of the peaks and the valleys of the waves, to create this wave, right, I can feel here these little columns that divide it. That's where our decreases create these little columns here, these little valleys, and our increases side by side are going to create the peaks. So to create one segment of this, you will need 11 stitches, okay, multiple of 11. So for our little dishcloth sample, we're going to do 3 pattern repeats. So we're going to do 11, 22, 33 stitches plus 3, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. For our sample today, we are going to cast on 39 stitches. But of course, you can do as many as you want, right? For a towel, for a blanket, for whatever. If you want to make a dish towel and do, 44, so 4 pattern repeats, or 5, you could do that. I think my blanket, I can't even remember, you guys, how many. I think I did 14 pattern repeats. So I believe that's 144. And then plus the 6, I think is 150, but I can't even remember. I'm going to be honest with you. I will try to pay attention to that and let you guys know. I'm almost positive my baby blanket's 150 stitches, but I could be wrong. Okay, I absolutely could be misremembering that. So that's not 100% sure. I will let you know. Okay, so we're going to start with our long tail cast on of 39 stitches on a number 4 worsted weight cotton and on a US size 7 or 4.5 millimeter needle. Something that I talk about to help me, because I tend to knit tight, stitch tight, cast on tight, bind off tight, is when I do my cast ons, I hold my needles parallel to each other. Like I'm going to use one circular needle, the interchangeable circ. I'm going to fold those 2 ends over so that I have a loop on one end, and both of my needles are parallel and they are both pointing to the left. Alrighty. So to do my long tail cast on, I get out about an appropriate length of what yarn I think I'm going to need for 39 stitches. Most people say you want at least 3 to 4 times the width of your project, just to be certain. So I've got my tail end of my yarn coming out the front towards me. And then I have got the cone end, or my skein end, coming out the back. And I'm going to grab that yarn right at about the place where I want my tail to come out with my right hand. And then with my left hand, to do my long tail cast on, I'm going to stick my thumb and my index finger of my left hand between the strands there. I've got 2 strands now, right? I've got the tail end and I've got the skein or cone end. So I got like this little loop that I'm pinching between my thumb and my index finger of my right hand. So with my thumb and my index finger of my left hand, I'm going to stick them in between those 2 strands, and I am going to simply spread them apart. And then I'm going to take my 2 needle tips, I'm going to stick them in between so that it's draped over those 2 needles, okay? And once I've done that, then I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to turn it upwards so that it's in like a, I don't know, like my thumb is just up, like a thumbs up, hitchhiker type position. I don't know what you want to call that, but, and then I'm going to stick my 2 needle tips underneath the strand that's looped over my thumb, okay? Underneath the strand, I'm going to grab it so that it's on the 2 needles, and then I'm going to go over to the strand that's draped over my index finger, and I'm going to go underneath that strand, put that on the needles, and then go back to my thumb and grab that. And now I've got 2 stitches on my needles. We're going to do that a few more times. Thumb and index finger in between the 2 strands. Needles go under the strand that's wrapped around the thumb. They come over to the strand under that, on the index finger. They're going to go under that. They're going to go back into the strand on the thumb. Now we have 3. We'll do it one more time. Thumb and index finger goes between the 2 strands. Thumbs up now. Stick the needle tips underneath the strand, the loop that's on the thumb. Go over to the strand that's draped over the index finger. You want to go underneath that. Grab that, go back to the thumb one more time, grab that. We now have 4 stitches on our needle, okay? I'm going to pause the camera because, you don't need to do this with me anymore. If you do need more help with that cast on, feel free to rewind, go back, okay, till you get it, and then you cast on as many stitches as you want for your project, and I will cast on 39. Okay, so I have my stitches cast on, and by the way, I did stop while I had the camera paused. I was like, I can't believe I forgot to count my pattern repeats on my blanket. So if you want to make the big scoop blanket just like mine, I have 14 pattern repeats of 11. And that will give you 154 stitches plus our garter stitch border of 3 stitches on each side. So we're going to do plus 6. So that's going to equal 160 stitches on my blanket. So if you want to make a blanket the same size as my blanket, you want to do cast on 160 stitches. If you want to make a dishcloth, just like my little gray dishcloth, you want to cast on 39 stitches. So I now have 39 stitches right here on my 2 needles that are held parallel. Now you just, you want to make sure you hold on to the end of these so that you don't lose them, right? Now you just stick your hand into this loop and you pull the 1 needle out, okay? So remember I said this is a 12 row repeat of a 11 stitch pattern plus 3 garter stitches on each side. Now I'm not using stitch markers today. However, I highly recommend them for if you're new to knitting and you're new to working any kind of wave or ripple stitch. I highly recommend them. If you're visually impaired, I highly recommend them because they're going to give you a really nice tactile indicator of the beginning and the ends of your repeat. This pattern is one that I know so well. I can do it by feel. I can easily feel my blanket, right? And know where I'm at, where my increases and my decreases are. So I don't feel like I need them for this pattern, but you never know. I might yet, halfway done, I might yet put those stitch markers in because they definitely help me to work by feel. So, okay, let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do is create our garter stitch edging. So we're going to knit 1. And if you want to put a stitch marker here right at the beginning to mark your garter stitch, you absolutely can. Knit 2, knit 3. Okay, that would be our garter stitch, but we're not even going to worry about that for the first 5 rows. But if you wanted to place your stitch markers now to indicate your garter stitch edging, you absolutely could, but you don't have to yet for the first 5 rows because guess what? For the first 5 rows, we're just creating the garter stitch at the bottom, okay? So this is row 1. In row 1, we're going to knit every single stitch. So you take the tip of to knit this stitch, you take the tip of your right needle, you go into the stitch at the end of your left hand needle, you go front to back into that stitch, wrap your yarn, pull it through, pull the new stitch up onto your right hand needle, push the old stitch off the left hand needle. Also, just so you know, I do knit differently than most sighted people. I don't even know for sure which way I knit. I think most people couldn't tell you which way I knit. There's usually continental and English knitting, right? Well, I don't even know how I knit, but I know it's not English. I know it's not continental. I just knit how I knit, and I am knitting. So I don't worry too much about whether I do it like you or anybody else. I knit how I knit, you knit how you knit, okay? So row 1 into the stitch, front to back, wrap your yarn, pull the new stitch through onto the right hand needle. Row 1, knit every single stitch. Okay, I'm going to pause the camera, work through the pattern, and see you at the end of row 1. Okay, here we are. I'm working up. I'm knitting the very last stitch of my swatch. I am now at the end of row number 1, where we knit every single stitch. This is what your project should look like. And now we're just going to flip our project over and we're going to start row number 2. Row number 2, guess what? Because we're working garter stitch flat, we are just literally going to knit every single stitch, okay? So take the tip of your right hand needle, go into the stitch at the end of your left hand needle, front to back, wrap your yarn, pull the new stitch through onto the right hand needle, and keep going, okay? So row number 2, we're still working on our garter stitch ridges. We're going to knit every single stitch. See you at the end of row number 2. Okay, so here we are at the end. I'm going to knit my last stitch of row number 2. And there we go. Row number 2, you knit every single stitch. You have now just created your first little garter stitch ridge. If you're new to garter stitch, that's how you knit garter stitch. You knit every single stitch on all sides and you create these little textured ridges. This is our project. We're going to flip it over. Okay, that's what it's going to look like. And now we are going to start row number 3. And guess what? Row number 3 is still knit every single stitch, okay? So row number 3, it's, by the way, if you are an experienced knitter and you want to fast forward, of course you can. We are going to knit 5 rows of garter stitch in a row. So row number 3, here we go, knit every single stitch, right? Needle tip into the stitch on the left hand needle, front to back, wrap your yarn, pull the new stitch through onto the right hand needle and put the old one off the left hand needle. So row number 3, garter stitch ridges, knit every single stitch. I'll see you at the end of row number 3. Okay, so here I am getting ready to knit the last stitch of row number 3. This is what my project should look like at the end of row number 3. We're going to flip this project over and we are going to start row number 4. And once again, we're still working our garter stitch ridges. So row number 4, let me get my needle here, my other end of my needle. And so row number 4, we are going to once again knit, oops, I think I'm a little bit ways from the end of my needle. Okay, we are going to knit every single stitch in row number 4, just like the previous 3 rows, okay? So I'm going to do that, pause the camera, see you at the end of row number 4. Knit every single stitch. Okay, so here I am. I'm going to knit my last stitch of row number 4, okay? So at the end of row 4, this is what your project should look like. And once again, we're going to flip it over and we're going to work row number 5. And this is our last row of garter stitch for the garter stitch ridges, okay? So row number 5 for garter stitch ridges, we knit every single stitch. Okay, so knit every single stitch in row number 5. And so as I said, 5 of your 12 rows on this pattern are garter stitch. They are knit every single stitch on this pattern. So it really is not a complicated pattern. It's easy to memorize. This is a great pattern for when you're watching TV, right? When you're tired, when you're hanging out with your friends, when you're socializing, it's a pretty good pattern for that, at least these 5 rows. Because if you
knit, you don't have to like, pay attention to your stitch count or your stitches or anything. You're gonna have this is good if you're traveling, maybe in the car, whatever. You want just some mindless knitting, and you don't want to have to pay attention to stitches and stitch count. You're gonna have 5 rows in a row of garter stitch, so that's nice. Okay, I will see you at the end of row number 5. Okay, so here I am at the end of row number 5. That is the end of our garter stitch ridges. So that's what we just did here, is we created these garter stitch ridges. Now obviously ours are still flat, right? Because we haven't done any shaping yet. So if you're brand new to this stuff and you're like, it doesn't look like that yet, that's okay, because we have to do these shaping rows. We're going to do 7 rows of shaping, of creating these peaks and valleys to give it its shape. Okay, so this is where we are going to start this now for rows. This is 5, so rows 6 through 12. We are going to do 7 rows where we do some shaping. So this is where, if you didn't put in your stitch markers yet, but you want to now, this is a good time to do it. I'm going to do that now just to be a good example and practice what I preach, what I tell the beginner knitters, visually impaired knitters, right? Put that little tactile marker in so you know what's happening. And also I do this, I talk to people who are visually impaired. I use different sizes and types of stitch markers. So we've got little round stitch markers and we've got little triangular shaped stitch markers. And so these 2 different shapes can also help you if you're visually impaired. You can put triangle stitch markers at the edges where your garter stitch borders are, and then in between your pattern repeats you can use circles. So stitch markers, these are fixed stitch markers. There's locking stitch markers. I've got heart shape. There's all kinds of different shapes that you can use. I don't know what my camera's doing. There's all kinds of different shapes that there's all kinds of different shapes of stitch markers that you can use on your projects, right, to help you to indicate different changes in your pattern. So we're going to do our first 3 stitches for our garter stitch border. So row number 6 is now where we change it up. We're going to knit 1, we're going to knit 2, and we're going to knit 3. That is our garter stitch border. So on every row, we are always going to maintain the first 3, and the last 3 stitches are going to be knit no matter what else we're doing to maintain our edge. So we're going to go ahead and pop on a triangle stitch marker to indicate our edge. So here's where we start our shaping. The very first thing we're going to do is to create a decrease or take a stitch out. So we need to do a knit 2 together. A knit 2 together is just like knitting 1 stitch, except we're going to knit 2 at the same time. Now, if you're a tight knitter like myself, it might help you to stick the tip of your needle into the first stitch first, just to loosen that up a little bit. And then under both stitches at the same time, wrap your yarn just like a regular stitch. We're going to knit those 2 stitches together. 2 stitches become 1, and you have just worked a decrease. You have started shaping, okay? Next stitch, we're going to knit. Next stitch, we're going to knit, okay? So that's what it should look like so far. Now we're going to add the increases. We're going to create our peaks. So we're going to take this stitch, right needle tip into the stitch, front to back. We're going to wrap our yarn. We're going to pull that stitch off onto our right hand needle, and before we take it off the left hand needle, we have to create another stitch. So we want to take our right hand needle, go into the back of that stitch, under the back leg, wrap our yarn, pull the second new stitch through, and then push that stitch off the left hand needle. You see that? 1 stitch became 2. You've just worked an increase. We're going to repeat the exact same increase one more time. And this increase is called knit 1 through the front and the back. Okay, into the stitch, front to back, wrap your yarn, pull the new stitch through onto the right hand needle. Before you take it off the left hand needle, you want to go into the back of the loop, back leg of the loop. You want to wrap your yarn. You want to pull that second loop through onto the right hand needle and then push that stitch off of the needle. So we've now made 2 increases in our pattern. Sorry, struggling here a little bit, but okay, so now we got that. So we're going to go ahead and we've done 2 increases to shape that nice tall peak. Now we're going to knit the next stitch. Okay, we're going to knit the next stitch. We're basically going to knit 3 stitches in a row. We're going to knit this next stitch, and now because we've increased by 2 stitches, we should have 10 stitches here on our pattern so far. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We want to work a decrease, okay? To maintain our 11 stitch count on this pattern, we need 1 more decrease to go with our increase. So to do that, we want to do what's called a slip, slip, knit. You want to go into that stitch from the left hand needle, move it over to the right hand needle, go into the second stitch from the left hand needle, and just slip it. This is the slip, slip part of the slip, slip, knit. You slip 2 stitches onto the right hand needle. That is the slip, slip of a slip, slip, knit. Now you take the tip of your left hand needle, you go back into the front legs of those 2 stitches. So now your right hand needle is in the back loops of both of those stitches. You want to wrap those 2 together to work the decrease. So a lot of people call this a slip, slip, knit. Some people might also call it knit 2 together through the back loop, okay? Because that's what we're doing here. And that is our first pattern repeat. I'm looking for my stitch markers. We're going to go ahead and pop on a round circular stitch marker to indicate that is the end of our first pattern repeat. Let's do it again. Okay, first stitch, we're going to do a knit 2 together. First decrease. This is going to create, putting those 2 decreases together is really going to create that deep valley in our work. Next, we're going to knit 2 stitches. Now we're going to create our peak by working 2 increases. Go into the stitch with the right hand needle, go into the stitch front to back, wrap your yarn, pull the new stitch through onto the right hand needle. Before you take it off of the left hand needle, you want to go into the back leg of that stitch. You want to wrap it and pull it through. 2 stitches out of 1. You've just worked a knit through 1 through the front and the back loop increase. We're going to do it one more time. Right needle goes into the stitch, front to back, wrap our yarn, pull the new stitch through onto the right hand needle. Before you take that stitch off the left hand needle, go into the back of it, wrap your yarn. Now you got 2 stitches out of 1. You've worked 2 knit through the front and the back increases right in a row. You're creating your peak. We are going to knit the next 3 stitches. And then we want to create that dip or our valley again to work a decrease. So again, slip, slip, knit or knit 2 together through the back loop. We want to slip the next stitch from the left needle to the right. Slip the next stitch from the left needle to the right. Those stitches are unworked. So now we take our left tip needle and we go into those 2 stitches into the front leg so that the needle, the right hand needle is in the back 2 loops, the back loops of those 2 stitches. Wrap the yarn and then pull it through to create the new stitch, the 1 stitch. We've just worked another decrease, and now we're going to put in another round stitch marker to indicate the end of our second pattern repeat. I'll do it with you one more time. We are going to knit 2 together to make our decrease, and then we're going to knit the next 2 stitches, and then we are going to create our peak by working that same knit 1 through the front and the back to create the increase for our peak. We're going to do it one more time, side by side. Go into the stitch, front to back, wrap it, and then go into the back leg of that stitch, wrap it, pull it through. 2 increases made right in a row. Now we are going to knit the next 3 stitches. And now we should have 5 stitches left. If you're doing 3 pattern repeats with me, we should have 5 stitches left, but you do you. If you're making a blanket, you're going to have more. We're going to do our last decrease here. So you want to decrease on each end, right, to match up with those increases. You're going to go into those 2 stitches together. You're going to wrap them. Do be careful doing these slip knits. When you first learn how to do them, you can sometimes drop one of them. That can happen. That happened to me a lot when I was learning that stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and put my triangle marker in to indicate that I'm at the end. I should have 3, no matter how many pattern repeats you're doing. If you're doing a 3-stitch garter stitch edge like me, you should have 3 stitches left, and we're going to knit them. Now, of course, if you're doing 5 on garter stitches on each edge, then you'll have 5, whatever you're doing there with your garter stitch edging. So that is the end of round number 6, okay? Let's take a look at our work here. This is what your work should look like at the end of row number 6. We're going to flip our project over. We are going to start row number 7. Okay, sorry, I'm having a little bit of problems breathing today, but it's okay. I'll get through this. So row number 7, we are maintaining our garter stitch edge, which means we're going to knit 1, knit 2, and knit 3 stitches to maintain our garter stitch edging. Now we're going to bring our yarn to the front of our work, and we want to slip our triangle stitch marker over. That tells us we're starting our pattern on row 7, which is purling. So we now want to purl because our pattern is actually in a stockinette style pattern, right? Knit on the one side, purl on the other. So for row number 7, now that we've done our garter stitch, we're going to purl every single stitch. So that means yarn is on the front side of your work. Go into the stitch from right to left, you wrap it in front of you, you pull that through to the right hand needle, new stitch created. So we're just going to purl every single stitch all the way across, and I'll see you at the end of this row when we get to our garter stitches, okay? Okay, I am approaching the end of row 7, so I'm going to purl this stitch. I'm now at my triangle stitch marker. So I'm going to move my yarn to the back of my work because we should have our 3 garter stitch, ridges, stitches, edge stitches, border stitches, whatever you want to call them, edge stitches, border stitches left. So yarn should be in the back now to maintain our garter stitch edging. And we're going to knit our last 3 stitches, okay? Alrighty. So at the end of row number 7, this is what your work should look like. And we're just going to flip it over and we're going to start row number 8, okay? So row number 8, guess what? Guess what? We're going to first of all knit the first 3 stitches to maintain our border. And then, let me get these 3 stitches knit. And then guess what? Row number 6 is going to be, or row number 8 is going to be just like row number 6, okay? It's literally the same row. So knit 2 together. I'll work it with you once. Knit 2 together. Knit the next stitch. And knit the next stitch. And then here's where we put in our increases. Go into the stitch, front to back, work it in the front loop, then go into the back loop of the stitch, wrap your yarn, pull it through front to back, into the next stitch, one more, knit through the front and the back, increase, okay? And then we want to knit 1, knit 2, and knit 3, and then we need to do, let's see, I wonder if did my stitch marker jump ship there? It might have. That can happen. Oh my goodness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, my stitch marker did jump, and that can happen, so keep that in mind if you're a brand new knitter. Sometimes your stitch markers can jump a little bit. Your stitches kind of go underneath the stitch markers. So I should only have 2 stitches left in this section. So we are going to work our decrease here, our slip, slip, knit. So into those stitches, that's the decrease. That should be 11 stitches. Sorry about that. Between those 2 stitch markers, I'm going to go ahead and slip. If that happens to you and your stitch count isn't 11 between your stitches, before you think, oh, I made a mistake, you could have made a mistake, but it also could be that your stitches went a little wild and they got underneath your stitch marker. Okay, so count before you assume you made a mistake. Count your stitches like I did. So we should now have 11 stitches, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stitches between our stitch markers. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this pattern repeat. So guess what? Row number 8. For this pattern, you're only going to have to do 3 rows. 5 rows of garter stitch. And then this row pattern that we're doing here for this is the same row. Row 6, 8, 10, and 12 are exactly the same, okay? So 6, 8, 10, and 12, exactly the same. I'm going to pause the camera and finish row 8. Okay, so here I am. I am at my triangle stitch marker. That indicates that I'm at my garter stitch edge of row number 8. I am just going to finish up my last 3 knit stitches with y'all. And then we'll take a look at what our project should look like at the end of row 8. Okay, there we go. That's the end of row number 8. You can definitely see it if you're sighted, and you can start to feel it if you're visually impaired. Your project's starting to take shape, right? So now we're going to turn it over, and we're going to start row number 9. Okay, so row number 9. Guess what? It's going to be just like row number 7. There really is only 3 rows to memorize in this pattern. Row number 9, we want to maintain our garter stitch edge. We want to knit the first stitch. We want to knit the second stitch. We want to knit the third stitch with our yarn in the back. Then we want to bring our yarn to the front of our work to begin purling. We've got our triangle shaped stitch marker there. We're going to slide it over. That tells us it's time to start purling. We're doing something different. So rows 7, 9, and 11 are all going to be worked just the same, okay? Rows 7, 9, and 11. We are going to purl. We're going to knit our garter stitch border, and then we're going to purl all the way across. So I'm going to finish purling, finish up row number 9, and I'll see you at the end of row 9. Okay, so here we go. I am just finishing up the purl section of row number 9. Move my yarn to the back because we are now going to knit our garter stitch edging. We want to knit the last 3 stitches of row number 9. Okay, let me finish these up. We'll take a look at our work. We'll let you see it again. This is what your work should look like at the edge of row 9. We're going to flip it over, and we are going to go to row number 10. And just what I said before, row 6, 8, 10, and 12 are identical, okay? I'll start it off with you one more time. We will knit our 3 garter stitch edges here, our 3 garter stitch edges at the edge of our work for row number 10. And then we're going to slip our triangle marker, and we're going to repeat that same row. So for row number 10, it's just a repeat. There's really only 3 rows to memorize here. Row number 10, knit 2 together. And then we knit the next 2 stitches. And then we take our next stitch, we knit it through the front and the back to make our increases, to create our peaks in our project. Knit it front to back. And then we knit our next 3 stitches. And then here we are. My stitches and stitch marker are behaving right now. Yay for that. We should only have 2 stitches left in this section. Okay. Slip them over. We're working our slip, slip, knit, or our knit 2 together through the back loop. That's our decrease. Okay. So this is row 10. I'm going to go ahead and continue. Pause the camera. See you at the end of row 10. Same pattern. Okay, I'm at here approaching the end of row number 10. I just did my last slip, slip, knit there. Slip my triangle marker, and we are going to knit our 3 end stitches for our garter stitch border. Okay, this is what your project should look like at the end of row 10. Definitely our peaks and our valleys are starting to form. Flip your project over now, and we are going to start, if I don't lose my project off the end of my needles here, that almost happened. So we are going to start row number 11, and again, row number 11 is just like row 7 and 9. Okay, it is identical to row 7 and 9. Row number 11 starts with knitting our garter stitch border. So for me, that is 3 stitches. Oops, except I missed that stitch. That is our garter stitch border. We're going to bring our yarn back to the front of our project. We're going to slip our triangle marker, and that tells us now it's time to start purling. So that triangle marker at the beginning says it's time to start purling. Triangle marker at the end says it's time to go back to knitting. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and purl all the way across row number 11. See you at the edge. Okay, so here we are approaching the end of row 11. We're going to purl that last stitch. We've hit our triangle marker. That tells us it's time to start knitting our edge stitches. Slip the marker, yarn in the back, and we're just going to knit these 3 garter stitch edges. Okay, here we go. Here we go. End of row 11. That's what your project should look like. Let's flip it over. Row number 12, last row, right? What I say, it's a 12-row repeat, and it's really only 3 rows. You only have to learn 3 rows to make this pattern. So let me pull off some more yarn out of my cone here, and now we will get started here. And we're going to do row number 12. We're going to knit our 3 garter stitches. Remember, row number 12 is just row number 6, 8, and 10, right? It's row number 6 on repeat. Okay, that's our garter stitch edge. We're going to slip our triangle here. That's going to tell us it's time to start our pattern. We started off with a decrease. Knit 2 together. And then we knit the next 2 stitches. And then we're going to knit through the front and the back. Knit through the front and the back to create our peak. And then we're going to knit the next 3 stitches, just like we did on row 6, 8, and 10. And then we're going to work our last decrease of the pattern. Slip the stitch left to right, slip the stitch, then go take our left hand needle back into those 2 stitches, wrap the yarn in the back, knit them together through the back loop. We've made our decrease. Once again, you should have 11 stitches between your stitch markers. Slip the next stitch marker. I'm going to continue. I'll see you at the end of row 12. Okay, so here we are at the end of row 12. It's a 12-row repeat. That means you know how to make it now, and you can definitely feel and you can definitely see that our pattern, our peaks and our valleys are absolutely taking form, okay? Now, as I said, I ended with 5 rows of garter stitch. I'm going to go ahead and do that on pause just to work up this sample and then get back with you. But what I talked about is this pattern right here. On the gray multi, I knit every single stitch. On the, let me get this sample out in the yellow again. On this one, for my garter stitch edging, because I wanted it to have a little bit of shape. So on 2 of the garter stitch rows, right, when it's on the same side as the stockinette side, on my stockinette side, right, where you do your shaping rows, I went ahead and maintained it in garter stitch, but I did the shaping. So I did the knit 2 together, knit 1, knit 2, did my increase, knit through the front and the back, knit through the front and the back, knit 3, and then did my slip, slip, knit. And that helped it to help my edge get a little bit of a wave going on there. So if that's what you want to do for your final garter stitch rows, feel free to do that. I'm going to do that, okay? And I will get back with you. We'll take a look at it one more time. But I'm going to go ahead and work 5 more rows. But you'll see right where we're at the end of the stockinette section when we start this. So I'm going to pretend like I'm at the end of my dishcloth, right? My gray dishcloth has 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want your dishcloth the size of mine, it's 39 stitches. It's 4 pattern repeats of the 12 rows, so that'd be 48. And then 5 more rows of garter stitch. So I am going to go ahead though on the first, if I were binding off, if these were my last 5 rows before my bind off, I would still want to knit every single stitch. So I'm going to pause the camera and do that. Okay, so on the final 5 rows of garter stitch, if you want the flat edge, like my gray dishcloth, just knit every single row. If you want it to have a little bit of shaping, then work 2 of those 5 rows in pattern. But, you know, we're just going to like knit our garter stitch edges here, right? So basically, we're just going to knit the pattern, but in garter stitch. Right? So just knit the other rows instead of purl them to maintain the edging. But this is just like an experiment, honestly. Like, I don't even know, right? I'm just playing with stitches. That's what I do here. That's what we do when we create. So we just knit 2 together. This is going to help give it a little bit of shaping on our edge. Knit 1, knit 2. You don't have to do this. You choose. You do it how you want to do it. It's your dishcloth. It's your washcloth. It's your blanket. You do it how you want to do it. And so knit those 2 through the front and the back to create the peak. After the knit 2 together, you do your knit. You do it just like you do the knit 2 together at the beginning, and then you knit the next 2 stitches. Then you do a knit through the front and the back to create the peak. And then, whoops, oh my goodness, got my yarn tangled there. And then we're going to knit the next 3 stitches. And then we're going to work a decrease, and we're going to do a slip, slip, knit at the edge, and I am going to just repeat that all the way across. Okay, see you at the end. Okay, so if you like that option of adding just a little bit of shaping to your final 5 rows of your border, that's what it's going to look like after the second row. When you turn it back to the side of your reverse stockinette side though, on those 3 rows, you just want to knit every single stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and knit this 3rd row of my final garter stitch border. I'm going to do the 4th row just like I did. I'm not going to do it on camera. Okay, I think you get the point. It's the same pattern, just in the garter stitch for the border. And then I will go ahead and knit the 5th row just like I'm doing right now for the 3rd row, where we knit every single stitch for the garter stitch. I'm going to just do these last 2 rows that we're doing right now, right? I'm just going to do those one more time for rows 4 and 5, and then I'll turn the camera back on just for a minute so you can see what that option looks like, and then I'll just let you bind off however you prefer. Okay? Okay, so this is my garter stitch. This is your option if you want to add just a little bit of ruffle and ripple to your final edging. You can do 2 of your 4 rows in pattern, and that's what it looks like. And then you just bind off however you like. Now, I talk about something that I talk about on my channel is that I have a really bad habit of binding off kind of tight, right? Because I stitch tight. So I use interchangeable needles. That's what I'm working with here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab an interchangeable needle tip of a size 8 or a 5mm to work my bind off in. And that way that bind off is going to have just a little bit more stretch to it, right? So that if you're like me and you tend to bind off tight, that is definitely something that you can do is you can knit that first stitch, knit that second stitch, and then pass that stitch over, okay? And then do the next stitch, and then pass that stitch over the top and take off your stitch marker, right? Get that out of the way. Go into the next stitch, knit that stitch, 2 on the right hand needle, take the first stitch on the right hand needle and pass it over 1 stitch on the right hand needle. And this is just one way to bind off. There's multiple ways to bind off. Right, there's numerous, just like with casting on it. There's many ways to bind off. So that's what I'm going to do right now is bind off my project. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for watching this little tutorial today. This is just a solid, I don't know what we call it, a solid knit wave pattern, stitch pattern, solid knit wave stitch pattern for washcloths, dishcloths, hand towels, blankets, and whatever you can imagine. So thanks so much for watching today, and I'm going to be knitting this blanket with you on my channel. So if you want to do like a little stitch along, knit along, and make your project with me, you can join me on my channel for some Mondays with May and for some Whip Wednesdays. And we will finish up my beautiful Lion Brand Big Scoop blanket together. And then you can even come back to my channel and see it for a Finish It Friday together. Okay, my friends. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Let me know what you're making, washcloth, dishcloth, blanket, and of course let me know what yarn you're using, what color you're working with, because I want to know what other beautiful yarns you're working this up in. If you're using the Lion Brand ice cream or Big Scoop, let us know what colors that is as well. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye, happy stitching, and bye for now. Okay, well, I thought I would show you the end result because this was actually my first time when I did these last 5 rows of garter stitch. This was my first time to experiment with it this way, where I did 2 of the 5 in pattern. Guess what? I don't like it very well. I think it's a little bit too loose and too open. So I think for my blanket, you guys can learn from my mistake. On my yellow swatch, I only did 1 of the rows, the 4th in pattern. So I did the first 3 rows on the yellow swatch. I did 3 of the, oh, I did 4 of the 5 were all in garter stitch. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 were all in garter stitch. On the 4th row, then I went to working it in pattern where I did a little bit of shaping. And then I went back and did the 5th row, just knit every single stitch. Guess what? I like that so much better. So it really is essential to do those first 3 rows, in my opinion. Those first 3 rows of the final row in garter stitch. This is how you create your own designs. You try things and you find out what you like and what you don't like, what looks good, what doesn't look good. You make mistakes, right? So in my opinion, so you do get a nice ripply edge on this one, but you get a little too much lace in my opinion. The yellow one, I think you can maintain a nice ripply edge. It's not quite as pronounced. Your ripple's not quite as pronounced, right? But you still get a ripple a little bit with just a little bit of a gap here, but it's pulled in tight with the first 3 rows. So when I finish off my blue blanket, I think that's what I'm going to do. But of course, now we know what 3 options look like, right? The gray one, we knit all 5, so it's more of a flat edge. The yellow one, we did 4 out of the 5 in garter, with the 4th being in pattern. We get a little bit of a ripple. And then, of course, if you don't mind your last section having more open lace to it, right? Then, of course, you could do it how I did it in the video, but I'm not going to do my blanket that way. I want it pulled in nice and tight at the end. So there you go. That's the creative process. We experiment and we try things, and sometimes we don't like what we get. So we just keep trying different things. Okay, my friends. Well, thanks so much for joining me. Please join me and we'll work up the blue blanket together. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. Happy stitching.